Disney is known for their 2D animation, but is it ever coming back? Hey everyone, this is Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net. If you want more of my views on entertainment, animation, Disney, the MPAA, whatever, make sure to click that subscribe button and ring that bell if this is your first time here. Now let's talk about this recent interview with Disney CCO, Jennifer Lee, as she discusses the future of animation at Disney and changes after John Lasseter's exit. Now, with a title like that, you can obviously tell this is going to be a pretty emotionally charged interview. However, we're not going to talk about the entire interview. Obviously, she's going to talk about giving more women better opportunities at the studio, that they're going to hire more diverse people, that obviously some SH in the work culture is not going to be there, or it's going to be tempered down a bit. All these things, really, really good. Totally agree with her. That's fine by me. However, there was a comment in there that I have particular interest in, and I was pretty disappointed by the answer, and that's what we're going to talk about. Now, you have to go a little bit down. First, they talk about the changes, but here's a question that I want to know. Slash Film asked a question Disney fans have been wondering since Princess and the Frog. Will Disney revisit traditional 2D animation? Which, yes, that's obviously the question I want to get answered. Everyone keeps asking this question. The fact that they keep asking this question shows that there should be an audience for 2D animation. Although, let's clarify the question a little bit first, because they said, the question was phrased like, will they revisit 2D animation since Princess and the Frog, which they say is the last movie that was 2D. This is not the last movie that was 2D. In fact, this was the last time Disney delved in 2D animation. Frozen was supposed to be 2D, but after this didn't perform as well as they wanted, and this outright bombed, Disney decided, hey, you know what? Maybe we were right. 2D's dead. Let's make Frozen a 3D film. And when you look at some of the special features on the Frozen Blu-ray and you see some of the animation tests for 2D, Frozen would have been awesome as a 2D film. I don't want to harp on them too much because it was really good as a 3D film as well. Now, this made over $300 million. Something that I would consider far from a loss. And it cost $60 million to make. So this was really good. Tangled, which was the movie after, made about $500 million. But it also cost $200 million to make. So I've been arguing for a long time that the success of 2D is actually much higher than most people realize, because no, it doesn't make as much money as 3D animation most of the time, but it costs a lot less. Now, why did this do so poorly? Well, it was because it was released on the same day as another popular movie, and now that you see this, I think you can figure out what went wrong. And so, it's really a shame that our last 2D animated film was this one. I kind of even cry a little bit thinking, what could the future of 2D animation been had Disney made Frozen a 2D film? I don't know if Frozen would have been a $1 billion hit, but, well, it might have. It might have, at the very least, done $500 million. But anyway, here's what they said. Delvecco said, that's such a big part of our legacy, and I love Prince and the Frog. I would say that there's still a lot of hand-drawn influence going on in our CG films. Now, that wasn't Lee. That was one of the other people they're talking to. And that is already, like, getting off on the weak start. Like, oh, yeah, that's a big part of our legacy. And I love Prince and the Frog. Yeah, I do, too. I have the poster in the background. You can clearly see it. I would say there's still a lot of hand-drawn influence in our CG films. And it's like, well, it's nice that there's hand-drawn influence in your CG film. That's not what they asked, but okay. And then Lee says, like in our films, like, she's highlighting our films. And he's like, I think we're one of the only studios in the world that can do both, and how that evolves over time and how we experiment with different styles. But it ultimately comes down to the filmmakers and how they want to tell that particular story. Now, there's a couple things being said here and they're both cop-outs. I think we're one of the only studios in the world that can do both. First of all, that's not true, because people were doing both for a long time. DreamWorks was doing both computer animation and hand-drawn films. In fact, DreamWorks has been incorporating more hand-drawn elements in their features, like Kung Fu Panda and Captain Underpants. And also, Warner Brothers for a while was making CG films alongside their hand-drawn films. So it's not the question of that you can do both, it's will you do both. And then they do that whole thing, and how that evolves over time and how we experiment with different styles. Well, a different style is a different style. To 2D is a classic style, and that's what they're asking about. And then they say, but it ultimately comes down to filmmakers how they want to tell that particular story, which I find to be a very interesting comment, because by all accounts, there have been several projects where the filmmakers have wanted that to be a hand-drawn 2D film, and Disney and Pixar have said no. For example, Brad Bird envisioned The Incredibles as a 2D animated film. He wanted it to be 2D. And Pixar, admittingly, didn't have the resources to do a 2D film, so they made it 3D. And it worked fine. It absolutely did. But then we also had Frozen. Frozen was originally going to be a 2D animated film. I think Disney insisted it become a personal suspicion, of course. I think Disney wanted it to become computer animated, and they made the switch. Also, Moana. Ron Clements and John Musker, had never made a computer animated film before. They had just made hand-drawn animation. I think Moana was forced to be 3D. And granted, I know Treasure Planet has like a lot of 3D elements in it, but that was what they were doing. Now, after Moana, I believe John Clements decided he was, John Musker. Why do I keep mixing them up? John Musker decided, he decided to retire from Disney. And for that matter, a lot of the 2D animated artists have moved on from Disney. Glenn Keane, my personal favorite, he moved on from Disney. Andreas Deja, he moved on from Disney. Most of the animators who moved on from Disney have gone on to make short films in 2D. And it's probably because they wanted to make 2D animation. They didn't want to make 3D animation, and Disney wouldn't let them. So I don't know what he's talking about when it's like, but it ultimately comes down to the filmmakers, how they want to tell that particular story, because I think a lot of the animators want to tell 2D animated movies. They're just not being allowed. I mean, and this is not a new conversation, by the way. Talk to any famous Hollywood director who goes to a studio, and it's like, you'll have like George Miller say, hey, Warner Brothers, I have this vision for a new Mad Max movie. Okay, we're listening. It's going to be wall-to-wall action. That sounds great. It's going to have Charlize Theron. That sounds great. It's going to have all these crazy stunts. That sounds great. It's going to be in IMAX 3D. That sounds great. I want it to be in black and white. No, you will not make it in black and white. You will make it in color. Happens all the time. So that's a weak response. But what does Lee herself say? She says, yeah, and some of our new shorts are going to see as they come out new styles, watercolor styles, even things we've never done, but using technology to help us do it in ways that are exciting as well. I'm assuming she's referring to some of the shorts that have been using computer animation, but it looks 2D. For example, Paperman, which is an excellent short, by the way. I believe that's on the, I think that's on the Frozen Blu-ray, if I recall correctly. And where it's a black and white short film about the guy who meets the girl on the train. It looks hand-drawn, and elements are hand-drawn, but it's CGI. It's taking hand-drawn and making it CGI. But it still looks hand-drawn. And then they did a follow-up short, kind of, called Food, which was the same concept in color. Let me tell you right now, the black and white version looked a heck of a lot more ready for prime time than the color short. The color short did not look very hand-drawn. In fact, it kind of looked like weak CGI that wants to be hand-drawn. So maybe that's what they're talking about, but that's not a feature-length thing. And the thing was like watercolor styles. I mean, Disney did that already. They did it with Lilo and Stitch, and it was a huge hit. You can do 2D animation. You're just choosing not to. Now, and they follow up that question with an interesting thing Buck, which was Chris Buck, shared was that the team who do traditional animation assist in the CG animation. And then here's another thing. People aren't even aware of it. The hand-drawn animators have helped out a lot with our CG animators. I think there's an appeal that the hand-drawn animators, it's innate in them, and they've been teaching the CG animators, Lisa, silhouettes and swirls of language, but continues putting that into our work. So when you look at some of our movies now, even though it's CG on the screen, underneath it is the hand-drawn deal. But of course, that still begs a question. Why isn't it hand-drawn? I mean, I remember like when Madagascar first came out, Jeffrey Katzenberg was bragging about how they had spent millions of dollars in this new animation technology, because Madagascar was meant to look like Looney Tunes cartoons, like, squish and squash, rapidly fast. You actually couldn't do CG animation like Madagascar before that movie because the way CG models move, they can only move so fast, otherwise the models will break, they'll tear. And so they developed a new form of technology so that they could, look like a Looney Tune cartoon. And they were bragging like this was like a big achievement, and a lot of people said, yeah, you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars investing in something that we perfected 80 years ago. So that's also, people want the traditional 2D animation style. They like the way it looks. They like the stories it tells. I think the thing with CG is when it's CG, there's also a certain expectation that it needs to be a little funny, which I disagree with, but I think because the industry was built on the Toy Stories, the Shreks, the Ice Age movies, I think there's like an expectation that it has to be a little quick-witted to a certain extent. I mean, you do have movies like The Polar Express, for example, that's a little bit more dramatic, if you will. But people see CGI and they associate with a certain style. And when they watch a 2D film, they want a certain style in return, and so they miss those style movies. They miss the musical and all that jazz. Now, here's the good news. Hand-drawn animation has not gone away. There's a lot of independent animation where hand-drawn has become more economic than CGI, and places like Japan, where the burgeoning anime industry is, continuing to use animation. But when I read this interview, it's disappointing because Disney is well aware that 2D is desired. People do want it back. And by the way, they don't want sequels either. I don't think Wreck-It Ralph 2 didn't do very well, and I don't think Frozen 2 is going to do nearly as well as people think it's going to. If it is, and if it's good, oh well, but I think people want original stuff from Disney. And it's frustrating that Disney, with all their billions of dollars, like, here's how Disney could honestly do it. I think Disney should do 3 films a year with animation. Now, 2 of them can be CGI, they're made to be hits. And how about that third one, you be a little bit more experimental? Like, make that one the stop motion film. Make that one the hand-drawn animation. Make it a lot cheaper. Give a new director some free reign to tell the story he or she wants to make. And here's the thing. If it only makes $50 million, well, it only costs $40 to $50 million to make, and that's okay because the Lion King 2 live-action remake, because, yeah, it's apparently coming, can carry that. Now, if you do want 2D animation, Netflix is the ones who's going to be stepping up their game. This is a movie that they're doing called Klaus. It's going to be hand-drawn. Another movie that they're making that's going to be hand-drawn is I Lost My Body. Netflix has actually invested heavily in 2D animation. Now, some people might argue, well, Netflix doesn't care about box office, and that might be true. But the thing is, they do care about viewers. They care about subscribers. And clearly, viewers and subscribers are watching this stuff or they wouldn't be investing in it. So if Netflix can invest in it, I don't know why Disney can't as well. But anyway, that's where I'm going to leave this. It's interesting that I read this because I'm seeing The Princess and the Frog in theaters tonight. It's AMC's doing their, big re-release thing with a bunch of Disney movies. So Princess and the Frog is one of the things I'm going to be seeing. So anyway, but my question is, what do all of you think about this? What do you think of these comments? Do you think these are appropriate? Do you think that Jennifer Lee is being honest? I personally think she's completely dodging the question. I think she wants to say no, there's no more 2D animation, but to say that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. So they're doing things like, oh, it's important, it's part of our legacy, the 2D animators are working with it. It's like, yeah, no. We want an actual 2D film again. When are we getting it? My guess, not for a long time. But I leave that up to you. What do you think? Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.